One. Blast off. We were just talking because this was counting down for us. We didn't know what would happen. And so it was like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I think we're live to the internet, Chloe DiVita.
We are.
How are you doing? You have such a green and lovely background there.
Do you like it?
Yeah, plants and squiggly things, and we both have like our little themed outfit. We're like a Swedish pop band. If only we were like super blonde. Who knew? Who knew? So we are gonna talk today about short talks, about tiny talks, about little talks, talks that maybe look like TEDx talks or TED talks, and share some insights there. One around what we've learned from coaching at TEDxCambridge and designing the coaching for TEDxCambridge, and also what we're seeing with other people. There are times where Chloe works a lot with people on pitches and proposals, which are often small talks that are big ideas. And I'll work a lot with conference organizers who are having a TEDx-like part of their event. I'm seeing this a lot where there's like a HR conference X, and it's a bunch of people from different organizations who are given 5 or 10 or 15 minutes on stage, and they're trying to I guess, play with the popularity of TEDx. So we thought today we would get together to share that, because people are always asking us questions. Is it worth it? Is it good? Should I do it? How do I do it? What do I say? How do I get booked? What do I do with the video? And dispel some of the rumors, myths, and share some best practices. Sound good, Chloe DiVita?
It sounds great, Mike Ganino.
I don't know. I think it's just fun if we just use names, or like we could go high school style here in a little bit and be like, yo, DiVita. What do you think of that? It's like DiVita and Ganino. It sounds like a locker room. It sounds like we could be in a lot. That's weird.
That is weird.
Yeah. It's 9 a.m. here on the Pacific, and getting weird. Really, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to try to keep it to a nice little short, concise thing. And if it's fun, maybe we'll do it again next week. We'll see. But we thought, let's get together and chat. So maybe let's start with this idea of, from an audience perspective, from people that are watching these like TED style TEDx talks, because there's so many on the internet. Chloe actually has been doing a huge research project around this, so she's been steeped in this. But what do you think it is that made these so popular, that got people so hooked on watching them, sharing them, and then we could talk about why people wanted to do them, and then whether it's worth doing today still, if it still means anything. So what do you think is that? Hi, little baby. There's Onyx.
Onyx wants to say hello.
Yes. Hi. Onyx should do a TEDx talk.
You'd have the best TEDx.
You would do a good one. I think so. Like a life of pleasure, being present.
You like that? He's into it. And speaking of, so why people like it, and the fact that it is taking off. Like you talked about other events. Like I know Alt Summit is doing this. They're doing this mini thing. I know in the pet industry, Banfield Foundation just put on their first, they're calling it their first, so I'm assuming there'll be more, event with just like this, where 6 speakers got up and gave short talks. It's called Woof Bark Meow. And so I think it's the idea of bite-sized content. Like in general, I think people like things bite-sized. We see miniature things and we like them. We just are drawn into that. And it feels more accessible, I think, to an audience member to sit and listen to a talk that's 10, 12, 15 minutes and feel like you can take away from it something that shifts your perspective. And that's harder to do when you're like at an event and you're sitting at a conference and you've got keynote after keynote or session after session. You're often looking for what's the one thing I can take away, because I can only remember the one thing. And when we kind of bring the timing down and you focus, that's one of the key things. You have to focus on the one idea, the one thing that you want people to know, and go deep on it. It allows people the ability to remember more, connect with it more, and then feel like it shifted them more. And I think that's a big goal of everybody that wants to step on a stage and do a talk like that, is they're trying to get people to shift their perspective somehow.
Well, and I think too, there are times I know when I read a book, like I'll get a business book. I'm really bad with this. And I'll read like the first, Stop. There's only a few back here that you can see. I won't show you the rest. You know what? I've actually started going to the library because the library is great. I can just give them back. I don't have to keep them. And this is why that's good, because what often happens to me is that I read like a chapter or two and I get it. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm good.
Yep.
And I think, and often what I think is, oh, this should have been like a Harvard Business Review article. Like this should have been a Rolling Stone length article. And we're really working to get a whole book out of this. It happens to me a lot. So it's nice, the library, because I can just go take the book back after I get the point. But I think the same happens sometimes for talks. Sometimes people think in a 60-minute talk or a 90-minute keynote, oh, what do I need to put in here? And there's something cool about streamlining that to 18, 15, 12, 8, 5 minutes. That's what's the thing? If I want more, I can find more. But what am I supposed to see here?
Yeah, I agree, because that's sort of I was telling you before we got on and went live, we were having a little talk about TED in general, because TED specifically stands for Technology, Education, and Design. And in the beginning, those were their three main categories. That was it. They wanted everything to fall under that. And since they've expanded a ton, which I think opens the door for everyone to go, okay, it's not just about those things, it's about everything. Now there's social issues. Now there's starting to get into like what it means to have aquaculture, what space, what's going on in space. There's so many different topic areas. And I think people in general, now that the world is this like 24/7 news cycle, availability of learning anything exists like just by going to your computer, they're more interested in feeling like they've got a diverse set of skills and topics to speak about. And having these short talks gives people access to that, to say, oh my gosh, I do know something. Because I know that's something I've experienced through all the work we've done with TEDxCambridge.
Yeah.
A lot of those speakers come from Harvard and MIT. They're very research specific, but all of a sudden I know things about Alzheimer's I never knew. I know about aquaculture, which I didn't know about before. There's all these topics that come up that make me feel like, oh, if anybody starts talking about that, I actually could say something because of what I learned in that short amount of time. And because it was so specific and about one thing that dove deep, then I can repeat something and feel like I've got something to add to the conversation.
Yeah. And I think for probably a lot of people, that idea of like, oh, okay, I get it. And this has encouraged me to think more about it or to go out and do something with it is much easier to take in a 12 or 15 minutes to say, ooh, that's just what I needed to explore. I would be interested actually on like YouTube, for example, how often the videos that pop up are people searching for help with something. And it's not just random, like kind of, I fell in a rabbit hole and here I am watching a video on aquaculture, but it's actually someone looking up, how do I break through, why don't I keep my resolutions? Like Amanda's talk, Amanda Crowell, where she spoke about why we don't do what we say we'll do. I think people are probably looking for that. Or, Mel Robbins' talk or Laura Gassner-Otting's talk. I think that people probably were looking for something and they found an answer in that 10, 12, 15-minute video. And now I can go on my way and do what you recommended I do, or learn more if I want to learn more.
Yes, it opens the door.
It's interesting though. So now we have all of these short talks and it's actually harder to give. I think people come in and they think, oh, great, only 15 minutes. It's harder than a 60-minute talk. Like I love the days where like when I'm traveling and we've talked about this, we're traveling and we're going to go give a workshop. We're going to go teach public speaking or storytelling somewhere to a company. A company's brought us in. It's much, if I'm flying to Chicago anyway, I'm not going to come back home in the day. So I'm going to stay all day anyway. Sometimes it's much easier to do a workshop than a keynote because it's like, we got time. We're going to sort through this together. When a keynote is, I find it is more stressful.
Yeah.
And then a 15-minute version of that would be even more stressful. But I think people struggle with the idea of like, oh, this is going to be easy. Yeah. It's going to be quick, but it's hard to, I mean, I find, and we've seen this with TEDxCambridge, often having to tell people, take stuff out.
Yep.
This doesn't fit the talk. This doesn't serve your big idea. Because I think people want to put all of the things in.
Yeah. Well, when your idea is yours and you're so close to it and you're so connected to it, you tend to feel like all of the things matter. Every little detail, every little story, every little point, all of the things have to be crammed in there. And in reality, when you very first started and got the idea, you sort of have to take yourself back to that moment and say, well, what was it that really pushed me to want to get that deep in it? Because that's where you have to bring your audience so that they get that curious. And it means not overwhelming them and really just taking the one thing, going deep with it, and having them be able to leave knowing exactly what your point was. What is your idea? Like, that's a key thing. If your audience can't get up and say, oh my gosh, Mike said this, and I totally relate to that. If they're like, well, I feel like it was this, and then he talked about that, but then it went here and there, then you've only confused them.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard for someone to spread your idea. If the idea is an idea worth spreading, then people need to be able to leave and spread the idea.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do that if the idea is confusing or broad and not specific and unclear. And it's like, wait, were they saying that we should do this, or was it about that? And then there was that part about the dogs, and what's going on? I mean, I love a part about dogs, but sometimes it doesn't fit.
Yep. That's why I love to say, choreograph your content. And that's in all the ways, you know, as a dancer coming to it and having choreographed many dances for not just myself, but groups of dancers, you have to think about how it all fits and how it all moves and how it all supports and moves along with the music. And speakers have words that they're trying to get out in a fashion that's easy for an audience to digest and make sure that they're not, you know, having some interlude that goes down some rabbit hole that just completely confuses everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jen Singer is chiming in on the chat. She is one of the writing coaches this season and last season too, for TEDxCambridge. She's one of the writing coaches that will work. And she says here that people think that TED is just a short keynote, but it really isn't. Again, a keynote is often the key note of a conference. It's about setting a tone and not necessarily always about giving people an idea we're spreading or something to do, but sometimes about the key note of a conference. And a TED talk, a TEDx talk, these are really a short talk, a 15-minute talk of any style should really be about what is that one idea that we need to get people to understand and how do we best package that so they walk away able to do that.
Yeah. And I think one of the important things in that, because we definitely have people who think, well, I've got a keynote, so I can just accordion it down into this little, you know, shorter talk and I'm good. And it isn't like that. And it doesn't mean that you don't have an idea within your keynote that could be what you want your idea to be to talk about, but you don't get to just slash this and add that and get to it. You have to take that out. It's like a module that you take out and you go, okay, now I have to actually flesh this out into the short talk. It's not quite a cut and paste.
So, okay. So we've talked about audiences loving them. We've talked about the way to kind of think of it. Why do people, so people are reaching out to us to say, hey, I want to give a talk. Sometimes they haven't booked an event yet. They haven't booked a TEDx event yet. So they might want help figuring out how to do that. Or they might have booked one and then they come and say, hey, I need help with this talk. If the reason the audience likes it is clear, we get it. It's a quick bite-sized idea I can run with. It's interesting to think about why are people, speakers, not speakers, people who just have something they want to do. What is the draw to it? Especially because it's become somewhat ubiquitous. I mean, you've just spent a couple of weeks looking through all of the videos, what went viral, what moved, what made it from TEDx, the YouTube channel, to TED, the website, which is one of the big kind of christenings of a talk in a way. It's saying, this was a good one when it gets moved over to TED. So what do you think is in it for people? Why do you think in this world of ubiquitous short talks, what's in it for people to keep doing this?
For the most part, and I know this probably isn't everybody, but for the most part, what I see is that even the introverts, even the people who are nervous to take the stage and have the fear about it, are still passionate about whatever they're saying. And if they can get more people to sort of get on board with them, buy into whatever their idea is, that feels good. That feels like it gives you a purpose. It means that your passion isn't only a passion, but it's actually something that people want to feel from you and hear from you, and that your idea matters. And I think that that's important for people. So even when they're not doing it because they need to get, like Mel Robbins, right? Her 18-minute TEDx talk, for which the last like 90 seconds are what mattered, because it's where she actually talked about the 5-second rule, which she almost forgot.
She almost forgot.
Yeah, but she did get to it, but she literally almost forgot the thing that made her blow up. And it's because that's what people connected with.
Yeah.
And so I think that feels good when you're finally recognized for having a belief in an idea and people gravitate towards it. Even when you're nervous about putting it out there, when that happens, there's a validation in your purpose and your passion and your work. And I think people seek that in some way, shape, or form. And this feels like a path to get there.
Yeah. And I think that some people think it could be a way to launch a speaking career. I think the same way that people sometimes think writing a book is going to launch a big career. That's not always the case. It's largely because it's so ubiquitous, and because we don't really know. I mean, you're working on trying to get deeper on it, I think, with some of the research, but you don't know what's going to make something go viral. I mean, it could be I was talking to Amanda Crowell, and her talk is like over 500,000 views.
Right.
And in the first weekend it went live, it was like tick, 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 growing. And it was like, what was that? And it's like, it could have been the video that it was paired with, that when it went on YouTube, on the side, it was paired with like Mel Robbins' video. It could have been that recently the talk is about kind of how to do what you say you will do, following through. So maybe people were looking for New Year's resolution. So it's so hard to know those things, like what might happen. Now you can build a great talk, you can deliver, you could do all these things, but something going on in the world to make it go viral, you don't know. So the idea of doing a talk as a way to launch a speaking career, which is a business, I think is very scary and wrong. Like, it's like saying, I'm going to start a social media marketing agency, but my business plan is just to go viral once and then I'll figure it out. That's not a business. And I was talking to you before about someone I was speaking to recently who did a TEDx talk that was not on the thing she does for business. The talk went viral, and now she's like, great, that's not what I do. So all these people follow me, but they don't buy anything from me. They don't buy my services because the talk has nothing to do with that. It's the danger of, I spent last weekend with Brittany Hennessy, who wrote the book Influencer, and she was talking about, you actually on social media largely don't want to go viral. Because what happens is you get this influx of followers who then are not your people. And so your engagement goes down. You offer them something and they don't want to buy it. It's like getting a bunch of people on your email list who aren't your customer, and then you're worried about emailing them because they're all going to unsubscribe.
Yep. And it's one of the reasons that as you're thinking about if you want to do, whether it's a TEDx or you're going to another event where maybe they're making a video, because to me, that's one of the key things is you come out with this product, which is the video. And it's thinking about how are you going to leverage that and use that and not make it be the end all be all. Like, it's not necessarily your launch, whether that's because you're speaking about something that isn't the services you offer, or it's just because you don't want to put all your eggs in that basket. But it can be supportive. I have had a couple questions recently around, is TEDx still what it used to be to say you're a speaker like that? Even people talking about, should I even say I'm a public speaker? Does that mean anything anymore? I feel like anybody puts that out there. And I think it does. I don't think diluting the fact that even with it being more popular and more TEDx events popping up, more conferences and other events creating this kind of short talk phenomenon and growing it, it doesn't mean it's reached its peak. It's literally how people like to consume content, and it's video. And so it's all still valid. You just have to step into it with the right mindset about why you're doing it and what you want out of it.
Well, it's like saying that oh, music has reached its peak because there's so many songs to listen to on Spotify. No. Or like I shouldn't write a book because there's so many books. No, it doesn't matter. And the other thing, I'll say this is like a little was part of your research how many talks were done last year, or how many talks were added to YouTube last year?
Yes.
Or how many there are in total? You know, some
in
number.
total, I did the total amount of TEDx talks, which was like, it was 1.4 million or something.
So 1.4 million that you could find on the internet.
Yep.
And there are 8 billion people in the world. So there's still a lot of people who haven't done it. So it means something. The same way that, like, yeah, if you could sit down and you can write a book, that still means something. And I know a lot of people say like, oh, anyone can have a book. It's not true. Anyone can have a book and anyone don't have a book. It's I said this the other day about Kylie Jenner. When people were in a backlash last year about her being a self-made billionaire, the youngest self-made billionaire, and people, oh, she didn't do it on her own, and nobody did anything on their own. But the reality is, she also has a bunch of other sisters who are not billionaires. She has a brother who's not a billionaire. She has peers out there who are not billionaires. So she did something different, even though she had help. The same way that I was watching someone and they were talking the same kind of thing about Paris Hilton. Like, she has all this. Yeah, but she did things that other people didn't do. There are other heiresses with a lot of money who don't do what she did. So she still did something. So I think if you're thinking about doing a TEDx talk, you have an idea that you think is worth spreading, then yeah, there's still room for it. And yeah, it means something. And yeah, if you can tie it to something for yourself, that's great.
Yeah.
If you can figure out how to build something with it, that's great.
And even if you go look online and you find other videos of other people talking about something similar, that doesn't invalidate your view or your idea about it, because you can only speak about it in the way that you speak about it. And certain people are going to connect with you. And content is always refreshed. You can find, if you go, that's why if you go search on TED.com is a great place, or the YouTube TEDx.com with all the videos. Search for, like, I don't know, organization. You're going to get hundreds of videos. It doesn't mean any one of them isn't worth the time that person put in. You're going to like one and maybe not another. That's the normal thing that happens. So your idea just needs to have your view, your perspective, and people will connect with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about one of the things that happens too is people come and they say, I want to give a, this happens to me a lot. So I'm the executive producer for TEDxCambridge. So people reach out to me a lot to say, I want to speak on that stage, because we produce amazing videos. We do it in the Boston Opera House. We have some of the best cameras in the game. It's an amazing evening of entertainment ideas. And we've produced some of the most popular TEDx talks out there, and a lot of authors and a lot of careers were built off of TEDxCambridge stage. So I get asked a lot, can I submit my idea to you? The thing about TEDx events is that they're all different and they're all independently run. And so they have really different purposes. So some are, TEDx in Chloe's backyard, and Chloe's theme is about empowering the future. So she's looking for speakers on that. And she might be okay with someone who just has some thoughts on something that aren't academically researched. At TEDxCambridge, we get thousands and thousands of submissions, and we go through them and look at them. But we also go on a hunt. We go out there, and our executive director is out reading journals, like research journals. If you've ever read a research journal, good for you. You're one of the 7 people who've read it. He's out there looking at who is doing new and interesting things. And often the speakers on our stage are not people who submitted. They're people we went after. And so you have to think about that. Am I a fit for this? Because if you look at the other talks that place has produced, are they from researchers? Are they academically sound? I've had a couple people, I'm going to be unpopular. I've had a couple of people reach out and say, I want to talk about the power of purpose at work. And it's like, okay, that's not a TEDxCambridge talk. That might be a TEDx talk somewhere else. It might be right for that. There's TEDx Broadway. All of the like Broadway, like the theater area. All of the talks there are somehow related to entertainment, theater, what's going on there. They do talks about design and things like that. There is there are TEDx at high schools. There are TEDx that are about medical things. There are TEDx at universities that are specifically around ideas for that community. And so when you start to think about it, you really got to look at that. And I find that a lot of people struggle to understand that they are different events and they have different purposes.
Yep. I've been asked that too. Specifically been asked, like, how do I hack the system and how do I just get in? And I had, it's the same answer. I mean, each organizer, they have certain, guidelines and rules that they have to follow. And I will say one of them has to do with, if there's going to be certain claims made in the talk, you have to have the data to support it. And in my research, I did find a couple talks on YouTube, on the TEDx YouTube, with a note under it from TED that specifically said, this talk does not meet the TED standards. You want that in your talk. So you want to make sure you're supporting it.
Wow.
But I know, I was surprised. But the point being that the organizer, in our case, the executive director, Dimitri, that is the person who gets to decide. There's no hack. There's no, your application has to be the best. There's no like, oh, they're going to find me, I'm going to reach out. I would almost say the direct reach outs might hurt you more than do you good, because there's so many of them that come through. It feels a little bit like if I'm an organizer and there's some person who just feels like they're the perfect fit and they're sort of hounding me, my reaction is going to be like, I have so many people to think about and I don't want to deal with that energy. So no.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and we've had friends. I'm thinking of our friend Sue Sandler from back in our heroic public speaking days. She did TEDx Wilmington Women. And then I think she was the connection point for several other people where she then introduced them. So that could be an effective way. If you know someone who's done a talk and you think you're right for that venue, then reach out to them and have them make the introduction. And I think Sue Sandler was like patient zero for introducing people. Your idea still has to be good and you still have to go through the process. It's not just somebody's going to get you on the stage, but that can be an effective way. If you know someone who's done that before, that warm intro can sometimes be helpful as well.
Yes.
Doing the research, looking at that specific event and seeing what kinds of talks have they done in the past? Did they just do a talk like yours last year? Might be hard for them to repeat. Is there a theme? TEDxCambridge, we don't have a theme, but a lot of them have themes every year. You could see that on their websites. And the other thing to consider is, depending on what your goals are for your talk, look at the production value of the video, because these are independently run events. And some of the events are like in an auditorium with the red dot in the middle of a basketball court. And some of them are shot with, 8K cameras in the Boston Opera House. So if you have the goal of this is going to be the talk that does something, which might be a dangerous goal, as we said before, then look at the production value behind it as well to say, is this video going to serve me? Now, go back and look at Simon Sinek's first talk. It wasn't beautiful, but the idea hit. So who knows? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but do consider that so you're not surprised that you end up with a video of you in the side of a conference room on a red carpet.
Well, and I think that's a good point, because if you go back and look at, there's videos going back to 2009, and the quality of those videos is very different than now. So I do believe in the last 10 years, the expectation for the viewer has gone up in terms of quality. So look more recently at what's happening and what's there, and it's very different than what it looked like 10 years ago. And I do think that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think, I just think it's important to know, like, if that matters to you, know what you're going to get so you're not upset. Because I've seen people who are upset after they get the video and they're like, doesn't look good, don't like this, the lighting was bad. And you could have predicted that by looking at previous year's video that it wasn't going to be high production. So just know that. And maybe also don't believe that the talk is going to make your speaking career take off. If you haven't been doing that work before. Okay, so we talked about why audiences love them. We've talked about why people might want to do them. We've talked about what goes into having an actual short, powerful talk, whether it's on a TEDx stage or at a conference. Again, more and more conferences are putting on these small things. There's a real estate coaching company called Tom Ferry. That's the guy's name, but it's the name of his coaching, huge organization. And they did an event, and one of my friends did like Tom X, I think they called it, Tom Ferry X. And it was like a pre-conference day where a bunch of the people from their audience gave 10 to 15 minute talks about their life, their work, whatever the case is. And so more and more this is happening, and there's a draw to it. So I think it's important to know if this might be for you. So we talked about event differences. So let's talk a little bit about refining your idea. Let's talk about the process of actually whittling that down a little bit. So I mean, when someone reaches out to you first, and you and I are working through developing some proprietary processes for this, but when somebody reaches out to you now, how do you kind of look at it and say, where's the idea in here? What's your process?
So my process is I have a form basically that I have people fill out, and it's around, I call it belief statements. And I make them actually write out, what is the belief that you have? Why should the world care? Why do you care? Because usually within writing that out is where we find the idea. The goal is that they're writing it in such a way that their idea is what they're talking about. But what's the hardest thing for people to do is to find a concise way to say what their idea is. And so I always go through and have them do these belief statements, and then we have a call and we talk through them and we find, oh, that's what you're talking about. That is the idea. And it's usually not exactly what they think it is.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I have people do is I say, I just did a podcast episode on the Mic Drop Moment about this as well, around what is the belief you want the audience to change. Like that's probably tied to the idea we're sharing, and sometimes helps to strip away all the other stuff that doesn't need to be in the talk, because everything should be about serving. What is the change point for the audience? What's the current world like? What's the future world like? And what did they have to change? What belief do you need to reverse in order for them to do the thing you want them to do? And I find that a lot of times it's that same moment of like, that's the talk we need to be working on, is supporting that inflection point of changing their mind.
Yeah, I find people get really tied to the because, like the reasons why, versus the actual idea, the actual thing that they think that's different, that if people could believe that with them, then something would change. They get very tied to because this and because of that and because of, and that's where you end up in lots of different pathways, not necessarily leading to the thing that you want them to know.
Yeah. Because it is the, like, what is everything that's coverable in this versus what is the belief that needs to change and what do they currently believe about it? At TEDxCambridge this year, we're fortunate we get to work with Tamsin Webster, who's doing some of the idea whispering at the top with her red thread method. But a lot of times this is something that you and I have to do when we're working with folks. And they come to us directly. We're kind of the full service TEDx talk production crew here, helping them with all of those things. But that's the interesting thing. Jen Singer asked question, if you have questions about doing a TEDx or doing a small talk, let us know. Jen Singer said about the idea of people that have been invited to do a TEDx talk, and then what should they be thinking about if getting on that stage was not a passion for them, if they've been invited to do it and they weren't thinking, I want to do a TEDx, but they ended up there. This happens a lot to the folks at TEDxCambridge, actually. A lot of them, because they didn't apply. We went out to them and said, hey, this looks like an idea we're spreading. Do you want to do it? And then we have a lot of work to say, hey, you're going to go through 16 weeks of boot camp that we've designed. You're going to go through like $100,000 worth of coaching in order to produce this talk. And I think that sometimes they're surprised by that. But what would you advise people if they've been invited to do the talk, they've decided to do it, they're going to do it, but what should they consider? What should matter to them if doing a TEDx talk was not the goal for them?
I think so if they're invited to do it, then they're out there doing something in the world. They're not just sitting under a rock and all of a sudden somebody was like, oh, what's this? Come do a talk.
You got any ideas under that rock?
Yeah. There's something that they're passionate about that they're putting out there that made somebody say, this could be interesting on my stage. I want to bring you here to share it. If it's a little off from maybe what their goals are, then I think for them, all they need to think about is how will I leverage this? Because I do think even when it's not fully aligned, there are ways to leverage it. If how you create your talk with whomever is helping you wherever you are and put it on the stage and you get this video afterwards, there are ways to share it by connecting it to what you really want to do. And actually, Mike, you helped me do this with something because I had given,
I said, you're welcome.
Thank you. Because I had given, if you remember, so I used to run a company called Blog Pods. It was in the pet space with my mom and with Tom. And we, I left in November 2017. In the 2018 conference, they asked me, I was there, I went totally on my own. I helped with our event planner. And they asked me to take the stage on the last night and give some like closing remarks. They literally asked me the morning of that. And I had to put it together and get up. And I did like a 10-minute closing remarks to just kind of try to reignite the community together and have them see what was really happening and that they were what it was about. It's not something I talk about, but I wanted to share it. And you helped me figure out how to introduce it and talk about it in a way where it was about the fact that I'm so passionate about the different work that I do when I'm asked to fill in at the last minute that I can. And you helped give me a whole narrative around how I could share this in a way that still spoke to who I am and let me connect it to what I do. And I think that is key.
And part of, I think what I saw was that for most of us, like I think our job is to break the fourth wall, and we don't ever have to become a better version of ourselves. It's that we have to strip away all the stuff that is not ourself.
Yeah.
And so I think what I saw, and just being, your dear friend, your close friend, is you don't really have the ability to do things that don't fit who you are.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't you doing something that wasn't you and then trying to be like, how do I make this make sense? It was you at your core. And so all we had to do was look and say, well, what is that core? What's the center that you play from? Because that was what you were doing. And when we looked at that, it was like, oh, it's obvious that it wasn't about this event. It was about this thing. And that's really who you are. And that's what's relevant to whoever wants to work with you.
Yeah. And I think that would be a through line for anyone who is invited to do a talk, because that something in them was seen, right? They were out there doing something and somebody saw it and it wants to bring that on their stage.
Yeah. If you're listening, if you're watching now, I guess later too, because it would be now for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a TEDx talk? Type in the comments, yes or no. Are you into a TEDx talk? Let us know what's going on. It's interesting to think about that. Is that something that you have a passion for? So we talked about refining the idea. We've talked about how to leverage it a little bit. Let's just go through like a smorgasbord of kind of like, what are some of the things people find themselves in because they're not, what are some of the best practices that we could share with people? I'll start.
Okay.
One is the idea that you're going to get picked and do your interview video. Sometimes they do an interview video and then you say, great, I have like a loose idea of what I'm going to do. And in the moment when I get on stage, it's all going to work. I'm a wing it person. And I mean, even if you have I'll give some truth here, Chloe. I'm gonna unleash
the cat out of the
bag here. So I don't often ever, I've done like, I don't know, maybe I've done over $1 million worth of speaking. I've never had an actual written script. I've never had a written script. Now, Igal is here in the room. I just spoke at his event last week in San Diego. Really, I cried like so many. I was texting Chloe and I was like, I'm crying. It was to a group in he runs a organization called Pawn Leaders, and it's all people from the pawn shop industry, but it's not about like how to sell more diamonds. It's about becoming leaders and living this epic life. And I was like crying so much, but I spoke on his stage, and the opening bit that I do is an opening bit that I've done for 3 years. It probably sounds exactly the same all the time because I've got it in my bones. I've rehearsed it. I know the stories. So they do sound the same, but I've never actually worked from a written script.
Yeah. Is it your island story?
Yeah.
I know
it. Cargo Cult. Yeah. Chloe knows it. I bet Egal, as I started to do it, was probably like, I remember this. I know our friend Tony Mayo was in the room. He probably was like, I remember hearing this. But it works and it proves the point. So I still use it. I've used it. I mean, that thing has made me over $1 million, that little opening speech. So I think that the idea that winging it doesn't work, even if you're someone who's pretty good at being in the moment and connecting. When you're trying to do a 15-minute talk, or when you're doing a 10-minute talk or a 10-minute pitch or a proposal, you need to really clearly know what you're going to do. And you have the clock is running. So let's talk about, like, do you script every single word? Do you not? Do you have a loose idea? How tightly should it be in rehearsal? What do you think, Chloe?
So I think that yes, you should script it. And I think what that script is for you is it's your roadmap. It's your path of where you're going. Because if you don't have that in such a short time, it's very easy to get off track. You have to know exactly where you're going in the moment and where you're going next. And I think a script is really important in making sure you do that. And then additionally, I think in rehearsal, and this is one of the things as head performance coach with TEDxCambridge that I work with the speakers that I coach on, is knowing the point of why you're saying that. So you're opening with a story. What is the purpose of that story? And now how are you connected to it so that the audience can be connected to it? And literally going through that script in that way, because I think there's a method to memorize to the point while staying on the path that is very different than memorizing to the word. And the words are important to get you to the point where you can do that. And so I always end up in a place where people will start rehearsing and they'll realize they messed up, because in their minds, they're trying to read their script and where they're at and what point they're at. And, oh, I didn't mean to say the sentence in that way, so I'm going to start over. And that just trips your brain up and it doesn't let you flow and move forward. It actually trains you to not do it right.
Yeah, you're practicing wrong.
About doing it right. It's about doing it well, and it's about connecting to the content. And the thing is it's your content. If you're the one speaking, it's your idea, it's your content. You know the material. You know what you would say if I just asked you, well, when did you think of that? You would tell me the story and you would be connected to it. So I think there's a really important piece to having the script, because it's the path to where you're going. And then it's also important in rehearsal to make sure you don't hold the word to word so tightly that you're no longer connected to the material and the content.
Yeah. It's so for me also, and this is one of the things that I'll do even when I'm working with someone, when I'm coaching on my iPad, I draw boxes. I draw I storyboard it essentially. And so when I'm giving a talk, I know it like a set list. I know the boxes. So within those boxes, I also know this takes me 3 minutes. This takes me 7 minutes. This takes me 8 minutes. I know where the beginning is, where the end is, and what the transition. So I have these boxes. And then in the middle, I draw like literally like a bridge. And I know that that's what I do when I work with people as well, because you can't just get up there and hope it's going to come to you. That's fine in the middle of a workshop. It's not fine for a keynote. It's not fine for a 10-minute talk. That needs to be a well-oiled machine. And so in rehearsal, even if you're a story block person like I am, you need to be able to deliver it almost the same way every time, because you've promised you would.
Yeah, and I think you have to make sure the flow of it is effective. And that's one of the other ways in which, whether it's a script or what you're talking about, which is kind of script-like, but different.
Yeah, it's just not word for word written
Right.
down.
So whether it's either one of those, that's one of the things I always do when I'm working with people. So like, here's a script I have printed out and I've got notes along the side. And as they're going through reading it, I'm writing the purpose. It's like, okay, so we're starting with the story that shares why you got this. It's a memory that brought you there. And then you're moving to here, then you're moving to here. So that I have the outline less about the content and more about the purpose. Because that's what the audience will experience. And so if the flow doesn't matter, if the flow doesn't fully work and there's a section that like, it's like, ooh, this needs to come in sooner so that the end makes sense to the audience better. That's one of the things I always have to look at is, so like with you, that's what I would do is let's storyboard this and look at the flow. Are we actually delivering it in a way that's going to help the audience best get on board with what you're saying?
Yeah. And I just interviewed, I haven't put out the episode, but I just interviewed Anthony Jack, who you were his performance coach last year at TEDxCambridge, and AJ Harper was his writing coach. And at the beginning of his talk, he had this bit where he started by saying, even undreamt dreams come true because look at me, I'm on this stage. And so AJ said, well, tell me more, give me some more stories. He was telling me this on the podcast. And they ended up putting one more piece before that, because then when he said that, he got this roaring, like the audience was on his side. If he hadn't had the little piece before that, it would have been a throwaway moment where the audience wasn't ready yet to be voting for him as the underdog. And you can't do that if you don't have something crafted, written down, structured. You can't move things around because you're preying on divine intervention when you get in the spotlight.
Exactly.
And it just doesn't work. And the worst thing you want to do, the worst thing would be that you get up there, you have 10 minutes, and then like you're at 10 minutes and you haven't said the thing you really want to say yet. And they're like, you got to get off the stage. And then you do like, well, hold on. The one thing you need to remember, but most of all is this. And they're like pulling you off of the hook. That would be really sad.
Yeah.
That'd be really sad. So, okay. So that's about rehearsing. What about moving? What about moving? Let's talk about that. You are the speech choreographer. So what about moving?
Yes. Well, I always say as a dancer and choreographer, which I mentioned, that dancers move to music and speakers move to words. And that what that means is you're not just choreographing the words that you're saying, but also how you're saying them and what you're feeling during them. Because if you're really connected to how you feel, you move very naturally. What happens to people when they take a stage is they often don't know what to do. And all of a sudden they're judging everything. And they're very like, does this feel awkward? What does this look? And so they get in this space where they're not physically connected to what they're saying anymore. And so I work with them to make that happen. And sometimes the best way to do that is not to move at all. So it isn't about putting movement to everything you say, but it is about being intentional with knowing you are connected here with what you're saying so that your body can naturally embody what it would. Because that's what we do in conversations naturally and normally. There are like tips and tricks for you to work on. For instance, when you're on stage and you want to make a point and you want to like drive it home, moving a little bit closer to the audience can create an intimacy. So there are tips like that that we'll work on. But in general, it's really just about finding within yourself that connection that you have to your center so that what you say and how you want to move with it feel natural, because it's not about being fake.
Yeah. And it's about, and what happens is that when we don't know, when we haven't thought through how we're going to move, we end up moving nervously, which then we think is like, well, that's me being natural, but it's actually not you being natural. It's a filter that you're trying to defend yourself. And so you're not actually moving authentically and real and from your center, like you said.
Yep. Correct.
Okay. So in a short talk, should I move at all?
Mostly, I think.
I guess if you stood there like this, it'd be really weird.
Yeah, it depends. It's why it's really hard to generally answer some of those things, because it's always about what works for that content in that moment. And people you could probably find the same exact line that people say in talks throughout. If you searched for like a phrase that was common, I can't even think of one at the moment, but I bet a lot of people say the same phrase in their talks. But the point of it is usually different. And that's the piece that would drive how you should move or if you should move, not the words. And so it's hard to say whether you should or shouldn't. What you should think about if you're on, say, a carpet that's maybe only so big, and you have a short amount of time and you have a video going, you want to think about how your movement affects not just the audience in front of you, but the viewers who will be watching you. And a lot of movement can actually be distracting on a video. So you want to have a balance. And there might be times where on a big stage, you would choose to move a little bit more. And on the smaller circular carpet where you know the video is an important product, that you choose to stand more. Because I would say when in doubt, just hold.
Yeah.
More impactful than pacing, than nervous energy. Like channel it into holding, especially your feet.
Being grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things too, you were talking about video, it's a lot like acting in a way, because if you're on a theater stage, you don't have cameras normally. So you need to be you need to move in a certain way so people can see it was really intentional. But if you watch film, I mean, they're framed like this. And so any small little movement matters. I just watched Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, and the woman that plays Rey and the man that plays Ben Solo, they're like masters at micro emotions in their face. Like, it's a close up of her face and you're like, I know exactly how she's feeling. That doesn't work on a theater stage, but it works really well on camera. So being thoughtful about that as well matters. Cool. This was fun.
It was fun.
Look at this. We were like, maybe we'll get on here and talk for 15 minutes and we're almost at an hour. So I don't know. Chloe, should we do it again?
We should do it again. I think we should.
Again Tuesday. We'll call it Talk and Talks on Tuesday.
I like it. You have some good ideas. If you ever need anyone to come up with like your own copy, you have to call the friend who like knows you the best, because that's what I have to do with Mike. I'm like, okay, what do I say here? And he always knows what to say.
You know what's so funny? I said this to you yesterday because people reach out to me all the time to help them with their about page or their bio or this and that. And I was like, why do people think I'm a copywriter? I was like, I don't understand that. And I don't know. I guess I am. Voila.
Good at it.
Voila. If you want an actual copywriter, Erin Lindstrom, who was in here, she's really genius. She helped me do my about page, which is one of my favorite pages on my website. So she's an actual copywriter who does this professionally. I just do it for friends. I do it for a glass of wine. So, and a hug. Okay. So, so Talking Talks on Tuesday.
Yes.
Let's do it. Okay. So Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
Let's do it. Tuesday. I love that. Check your calendar there.
I'm checking my calendar. I'm free.
Okay. We're going to talks next week at Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, right back here. So join us there. If you have more questions, if you're watching this later and you have questions, post it in this and we'll go back and collect them and we'll answer those next week. Cause why not? You got a talk inside of you, then you should talk your talk.
Yes, you should.
Okay. Chloe DiVita, this was fun.
It was Mike Ganino.
Okay. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.